Hello Jerry, thank you for joining me today. How are you?
Hello Joanna, I'm doing great. How about you?
I am doing well, thank you. So, let us begin the interview. Can you tell me what is React.js and why is it useful?
React.js is a JavaScript library developed by Facebook for building user interfaces. It's useful because it allows developers to create reusable components, uses a virtual DOM for better performance, enables writing HTML code directly within JavaScript using JSX, and has a unidirectional data flow which makes applications more predictable and easier to debug.
Great explanation. Now, can you explain the differences between a functional component and a class component in React?
Certainly. A functional component is a simpler and more modern way of creating components in React. It's just a JavaScript function that returns JSX. On the other hand, a class component is a JavaScript class that extends React component and implements a render method which returns JSX. Functional components are often preferred because they are more concise and easier to understand, especially when using React hooks for managing state and side effects.
Well said. Can you tell me about JSX and its purpose in React?
JSX is a syntax extension for JavaScript that allows you to write HTML-like code within your JavaScript code. It's used in React to define the structure and appearance of the user interface components. JSX makes the code easier to read and maintain since it closely resembles the final output, and it's easier to understand the relationship between the UI and the underlying JavaScript logic.
What is the virtual DOM, and how does it improve performance in React applications?
The virtual DOM is an in-memory representation of the actual DOM. When a React component's state or props change, React creates a new virtual DOM that represents the updated UI. It then compares this new virtual DOM with the previous one to identify the differences, a process called diffing. After that, React updates only the actual DOM elements that have changed, instead of updating the entire DOM. This process is called reconciliation, and it significantly improves the performance of React applications by minimizing the number of costly DOM manipulations.
How is state managed in a React component?
In a class component, state is managed using the _this state object and the _this set state method. In a functional component, state is managed using the use state React hook. The use state hook returns an array with two elements, the current state value and a function to update the state. This approach makes it easier to manage state in functional components and helps avoid some of the complexities of using this in class components.
What are props and how are they used in React?
Props, short for properties, are a way to pass data from a parent component to a child component in React. Props are read-only and should not be modified by the child component. They are used to customize the behavior and appearance of components and to enable components to communicate with each other in a unidirectional data flow.
Can you explain the lifecycle of a class component in React and its most important methods?
Sure. The lifecycle of a class component in React consists of three main phases: mounting, updating, and unmounting. During the mounting phase, the component is created and inserted into the DOM. The most important methods in this phase are constructor static get derived state from props and component didMount . The updating phase occurs when a component's state or props change, and the component needs to re-render. The key methods in this phase are static get derived state from props, should component update, render, get snapshot before update, and component did update. Lastly, the unmounting phase takes place when a component is being removed from the DOM. The primary method in this phase is component will unmount. It's important to note that with the introduction of React hooks, lifecycle methods are being replaced by equivalent hooks, such as useEffect, in functional components.
What are React hooks, and what are the most common ones?
React hooks are functions that let you use state and other React features in functional components instead of classes. They simplify the code and improve readability. Some of the most common React hooks are use state which allows you to manage local state in functional components. Use effect which lets you handle side effects like fetching data, setting up subscriptions, or updating the DOM. And use context which allows you to access the context value and share data across multiple components without passing props explicitly.
What is context in React, and what is its purpose?
Context in React is a way to share data and functionality between components without having to pass props through every level of the component tree. It's especially useful when you need to provide global data or functionality that many components in your application need to access, like themes, user information, or localization data. Context is created using the React create context function, and its value is provided and consumed using the provider and consumer components or the use context hook.
What is Redux, and how does it integrate with a React application?
Redux is a popular library for managing application state in a predictable manner. It's often used with React but can be used with other libraries and frameworks as well. Redux introduces a single store that holds the entire application state, and all state updates are performed using actions and reducers. It integrates with React applications using the React Redux library, which provides the provider component to make the store available to all components and the connect function or use selector and use dispatch hooks to connect React components to the Redux store. This setup allows for more predictable state management and makes it easier to track state changes and debug applications.
How is navigation handled in a single-page application, SPA, with React?
In a single-page application with React, navigation is typically handled using a client-side routing library like React Router. React Router allows you to define routes in your application, associate them with components, and update the displayed component based on the current URL without requiring a full-page reload. This gives the user a smooth, fast navigation experience similar to that of traditional multi-page applications, while still benefiting from the performance improvements and simplicity of a SPA.
What is React Fragment and when should it be used?
React Fragment is a special type of component that allows you to group multiple elements together without adding an extra DOM node to the output. It's useful when you need to return multiple sibling elements from a component but don't want to wrap them in a container element, such as a div . This can help reduce unnecessary nesting in the DOM and improve the performance and maintainability of your application.
What is a high-order component, HOC, and what is its purpose?
A high-order component, HOC, is a function that takes a React component and returns a new component with additional props or modified behavior. The purpose of HOCs is to allow you to reuse component logic across multiple components, without modifying their internal implementation. HOCs can be used for tasks such as data fetching, state management, or applying styles to components. However, with the introduction of React hooks, many use cases for HOCs can now be achieved using custom hooks, which are often considered more straightforward and easier to use.
How is form handling managed in React?
Form handling in React can be managed using controlled components, where the form data is handled by the component's state and updated using event handlers. Alternatively, you can use uncontrolled components, where form data is handled by the DOM itself. However, controlled components are generally recommended, as they provide better consistency and easier integration with the rest of your application's state. In addition to the native form handling approach, there are also third-party libraries like Formic, which provide a more sophisticated and streamlined form management experience, handling form state, validation, submission, and error handling out of the box.
What is the prop key, and why is it important in rendering lists in React?
The key prop is a special attribute that you need to provide when rendering a list of elements in React. It helps React identify which items in the list have changed, been added, or been removed, allowing it to perform more efficient updates to the DOM. Keys should be unique and stable within the list, so that each item can be associated with its corresponding DOM element across re-renders. Common choices for keys are unique IDs from the data or, in some cases, the index of the item in the list. However, using indexes as keys is not recommended when the order of items may change, as it can lead to performance issues and incorrect behavior.
What is React Memo, and when should it be used?
React Memo is a higher-order component that can be used to optimize the rendering of functional components by memoizing the result of a component render. When a component is wrapped with React Memo, React will only re-render the component if its props have changed, based on a shallow comparison. This can help improve performance in cases where a component renders the same output for the same props and doesn't need to be updated as frequently. However, it's important to use React Memo judiciously, as unnecessary memoization can increase memory usage and lead to a slower application.
What performance optimization strategies would you recommend for a React application?
There are several performance optimization strategies for React applications. Use React Memo or Pure Component to minimize unnecessary re-renders for components with unchanged props. Optimize the use of keys when rendering lists to ensure efficient DOM updates. Lazy load components or chunks of your application using React lazy and code splitting techniques to reduce the initial load time. Implement virtualization or windowing for large lists or data tables using libraries like React Window to reduce the number of rendered DOM elements. Utilize the use callback and use memo hooks to memoize callbacks and computed values, preventing unnecessary re-renders or calculations. Use performance profiling tools like the React DevTools Profiler to identify performance bottlenecks and optimize your components. Optimize the use of context and state management libraries like Redux to avoid unnecessary component updates. Keep in mind that optimization strategies should be applied selectively, focusing on parts of the application that have a significant impact on performance.
How is error handling and recovery managed in React applications?
Error handling and recovery in React applications can be managed using error boundaries. An error boundary is a React component that can catch JavaScript errors thrown by its child components, log those errors, and display a fallback UI instead of crashing the entire application. Error boundaries are created using a class component with a component didCatch method or a functional component with the use error boundary hook. In addition to error boundaries, it's essential to handle errors that occur during asynchronous actions, such as network requests or timeouts, using proper error handling techniques like try-catch blocks or error handling functions in promise chains or async await syntax.
What is your experience with testing React components, and what tools have you used?
I have experience with both unit testing and integration testing of React components. For unit testing, I've used Jest as the test runner and testing framework, along with React testing library for testing individual components in isolation. React testing library provides a set of utilities for rendering components, interacting with them, and asserting their behavior, while encouraging best practices like testing based on the user's perspective rather than the implementation details. For integration testing, I've used tools like Cypress and Puppeteer to test how components work together within the application, simulating user interactions and ensuring that the overall user experience is working as expected. These tools allow you to test your application in a real browser environment, making it possible to catch issues that might not be apparent during unit testing alone. In addition to these testing tools, I have experience with setting up continuous integration pipelines using platforms like GitHub Actions or CircleCI, which run the tests automatically whenever changes are pushed to the repository, ensuring that the application remains stable and bug-free as new features are developed.
Can you describe a project where you have used React.js and explain how you tackled specific challenges that arose?
Certainly. I recently worked on a project where we developed a dashboard application for monitoring IoT devices. The dashboard had to display real-time data from thousands of devices, and the main challenge was to handle this large volume of data efficiently while providing a responsive and interactive user interface. We used React JS is the main library for building the user interface, along with Redux for managing the application state. To tackle the performance challenges, we implemented several optimizations. We used virtualization with the React window library to efficiently render large lists and tables of data without causing performance issues due to a high number of DOM elements. We implemented real-time data updates using WebSockets and optimized the Redux store updates to minimize unnecessary re-renders and ensure that the UI remained responsive even as new data was constantly streaming in. We utilized React lazy and code splitting to split the application into smaller chunks, reducing the initial load time and improving the overall performance. As a result, we were able to build a high-performance dashboard that provided a smooth and responsive user experience, even with the large volume of real-time data being processed.
Thank you for sharing your experience, Jerry. It was great learning more about your skills and expertise in React.js. We'll review your application and get back to you soon. Do you have any questions for us?
Thank you, Joanna. I'd like to know more about the team I'd be joining and the projects that the team is currently working on. Can you share some insights into the work environment and the company's approach to software development?
Of course. At our company, we value collaboration and open communication. Our development teams typically consist of cross-functional members, including developers, designers, and product managers. We follow agile methodologies, such as Scrum or Kanban, and use tools like Jira and Confluence to manage our projects. As for the projects, we work on a variety of web and mobile applications across different industries, using technologies like React, React Native, Node.js, and GraphQL, among others. Our focus is on building high-quality, scalable, and maintainable software using best practices and the latest industry trends. We also invest in continuous learning and professional development to ensure that our teams are up to date with the latest technologies and techniques.
Thank you for the information, Joanna. I appreciate the opportunity to interview with your company, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon.
Thank you, Jerry. We'll be in touch soon. Have a great day.
You too, Joanna. Have a great day.
Goodbye, Jerry.
Goodbye, Joanna.